All right. Welcome, everybody, to the CS Leadership Roundtable, your monthly forum for actionable insights across customer success, support, and service. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder and chief customer officer of Success Hacker and chief product officer for Success Coaching. This learning series is brought to you by Success Coaching, where we've trained over 40,000 professionals across 96 countries. Whether you're focused on customer success, technical support, or frontline service, our programs are designed to help your team deliver exceptional customer experiences. You can find all the details of our offerings on our website, successcoaching.co, or in the chat where Ashley just provided some links and any coupon codes we're offering. I think we're doing a promo for our upcoming fall coaching cohorts that I teach through the University of San Francisco. Great program, one of my favorite products. Get to meet with me over 12 weeks and help you connect the dots between what you're learning, how to apply it in your world, and you can earn both your certification from us as well as continuing education credits through the university. So check that out. For our topic today, we're going to be discussing managing remote customer success teams. But a few quick housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded and will be available next week with a transcript on our website. Use the Q&A button for questions. Higher upvoted questions get priority. Keep the chat for commentary only, please. And LinkedIn Live viewers, you can post questions directly in the comments, and they will be relayed to us by our friend Santana, who is sitting in and looking for your questions. Now, what sets our roundtable apart is our focus on real-world applications. So we bring together industry experts who share practical insights that you can implement regardless of your company's size or customer engagement model. And I've got three outstanding leaders who are joining us from the field, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves to y'all, have them talk a bit about themselves before we get started. So let's begin with our introductions in alphabetical order as usual with Chelsea.
Hello, I'm excited to be here today. I'm Chelsea Loua. I'm a manager of customer success at Go1. I lead a fully remote CS team supporting a diverse range of customers globally. I'm passionate about building connection and driving outcomes, even when we're not all in the same place.
Awesome. Thanks, Chelsea. Next up is Karla.
Hello, everyone. I'm Karla Kannan. I currently serve as a fractional head of operations and customer experience at Scopio. That's where I align our post-sale operations with customer outcomes. And my background spans SaaS, hospitality, tech, and procurement. And I've spent the last decade building customer-centric strategies that drive retention and operational efficiency across globally distributed teams.
Oh, do it with a smile, too. Awesome. Thanks, Karla. And rounding out our panel of experts is Karthik.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karthik. I have 2 decades of experience in customer success, helping SaaS businesses scale across stages and markets, drive retention, growth, and established portfolios. I've led distributed teams from NA to APAC, managed nearly a quarter of company revenue. Today, I run Customer Success Compass, where I coach CS professionals and leaders to build scalable, value-led programs. And I also consult with B2B SaaS companies to help them align customer success with product innovation.
Awesome. Thanks, Karthik. All right, let's get to the topic. Here's a controversial question that's been keeping me up at night. Are we actually leading our distributed customer experience teams, or are we just really good at digital babysitting? So let me paint you a picture. Your CX professionals have been managing customers remotely for years. They're pros at that. But now that your team is distributed, I'm seeing leaders obsess over productivity tracking software, daily check-ins, and monitoring tools that would make a helicopter parent blush. Research shows that 70% of leaders now admit they're comfortable using screen recording and keystroke tracking to monitor the remote employees, while 73% of potential employees consider this level of surveillance a major red flag. Now, here's what's really troubling me. While we're busy tracking mouse clicks and scheduling status meetings, the best CX professionals are quietly updating their LinkedIn profiles and looking for leaders who actually trust them to do the job they've been successfully doing for years. So be honest. how much of your distributed team management strategy is actually just fear dressed up as accountability?
Well, I'll take that one.
Okay.
I actually love that question. And I'm going to admit that I've seen both ends of the spectrum. Nowadays, I think it's very common to see people tracking employees. And in my role, I like to focus more on less on script time and more on outcomes. Our teams are fully remote. And the reality is, if I have to monitor clicks to know where people are adding value, I probably hired the wrong person because I failed to give enough clear goals. And for me, from my perspective, for these distributed teams to thrive, us as leaders have to let go of that control theater, and we have to lean into clarity. We have to trust and have people be accountable through impact. And that is very hard to do because the strongest CS professionals, we don't need to be babysitters. We need to provide clear paths. We need to have tools that remove that friction. And we need to know when to step in and when to get out of the way. We have to learn to trust. And if we don't trust, then we don't have the right people or we are not doing our jobs correctly.
Chelsea, Karthik, anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with it. But I mean, just to summarize, it's real accountability comes from clarity and shared ownership. It's not just because of constant monitoring.
And we were touching on this a little earlier before we kick things off. I was shocked to find out, because once again, I've been running this business for the last 10 years. So I did have remote employees. When I was an operational executive, I didn't have a whole lot of remote employees, but I still had remote employees. And some of the statistics that I pulled out about what's happening these days were shocking. 46% of employees said their companies introduced or increased employee productivity monitoring software in the past year. 73% of managers are storing recordings of staff calls, emails, or messages to evaluate their employee performance. 78% of employers are now using monitoring software. And 46% of tech workers say they'd quit their jobs if their organization started tracking keystrokes or taking screenshots. And my management philosophy was, hire slow, fire fast, make sure you're getting the right people in, you're setting appropriate expectations for their job, you're monitoring the right statistics. What I also found was a big part of the problem is that are we putting people in middle management positions that aren't doing their job or don't know how to do their job?
I think that's a really great point. And really, when we focus too much on activity tracking, we risk sending that message that we don't trust the team to manage their work, and that can create a feeling that can erode engagement and morale. Instead, I personally tried to shift the conversation to results. So things like, are we supporting our customers? Are we meeting goals? Where can I remove obstacles rather than adding pressure? Of course, that means having clear processes and open communication, but I believe in leading with trust first, and try to get away from more of that fear disguised as accountability.
Yeah, I agree with Chelsea, because if it's management by fear, people are only going to accept that for so long. And especially the new generations that are coming into the workplace, it's more around what tools are we providing those employees to be successful? I have always been of the idea that if I have provided the employee with training, the tools and the materials that they need to be successful, or the processes to be successful, then it's no longer on me as a manager if they were not to succeed. But if I have not given them that, then it's on me. So if all I do is have them provide me metrics all day long, or I'm monitoring their metrics, I'm not really doing my job, because then I don't really know where's their impact. If I'm just tracking how many emails they open or how quickly they respond to a client, I don't know how well that translates into outcomes for our customers. Is that leading to retention? Is it them being online really going to tell me whether we're going to have a renewal? No, it's really more around them understanding how they impact the overall strategy of the company, and me understanding how their activities tie into that.
Well, and it's interesting. Another thing that I discovered in doing my research is the trust versus control paradox. So what I found was 7 in 10 managers actually believe employee monitoring technology improves performance. 7 in 10. But 72% of their employees claim it has no impact on performance, and in some instances actually diminishes it. Right. So it's once again back to a point I was making for anybody who saw my LinkedIn series that I published over the last roughly month about customer success investments and where are you investing your money. It's like they're spending a lot of time and money focused on systems and surveillance, and yet when you try and get people trained and enabled, there's tremendous pushback. I don't get it. I don't get it. And yeah, I'm in the business of enabling customer success managers. People are like, yeah, well, that's what your business is. But the math makes sense. Not investing in enabling your people makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And it continues to baffle me. I mean, Todd, my partner, and I have these conversations on a weekly basis. Why is this so hard to convey to people? I don't get it. Now, if you discovered that your monitoring and check-in processes were actually decreasing team performance, what would you eliminate first?
I would say daily stand-ups or any forced updates that adds no value. Right, because I've seen this, right, and when you do daily stand-up, it only feels like you're only looking at the performance in a different way, like proving them they were busy, or like instead of actually focusing on the customer's way. It's better to scrap those and then keep it more like probably weekly team review and shift any async updates. You have a lot of tools. You can do it via Slack or Teams, or that will actually bring in more transparency without disrupting the teamwork.
Yeah. Yeah, we do. I have daily stand-ups with Ashley, right? But that doesn't stop me from my the frequent communication via Slack. Right? The daily stand-ups for us to have a conversation about something, not to just sit there and regurgitate the stuff that you could be sending me in a text-based update.
I agree with that. I feel sorry, Karla. There's always a chance of that when we're on this, right? I actually think that daily stand-ups are a really great way to help people, especially in a remote environment, to feel connected with each other. So I think that those are very important. I definitely think that there are things that should be discussed there and things that should be discussed via email or Slack or whichever tool you are using. But I do feel like a very strong pull that it's still very important to have those stand-ups so that everybody still feels connected in such a remote environment.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, and from my perspective, evaluate how effective your daily stand-ups are. Are they translating into actionable activity? If the answer is no, then there's no point. Even your one-on-ones, meeting just for the sake of meeting, and so the employee then just tells you all their challenges, but expects you to bring the solution to them, are also ineffective meetings. So it might be best to just space them out a little bit more. Like we used to have a weekly meeting, and in that weekly meeting, I made sure that it was a teaching session. I will come with a topic that I saw my team, one of them struggled with the previous week. And from my perspective, if one of them struggled with it, it was likely a question to come up from someone else. And we made that a small teaching session. So these meetings were always with a purpose. If part of the activities that you're using to monitor your team are really just pointless, one, people stop attending because there's no interest. And then the second part of it is everybody walks out of it saying this meeting could have been an email. So what was the point? For me, employee success is customer success. You cannot have one without the other.
I love that. Actually reminds me of something that Sir Richard Branson says all the time. My customers aren't number one. My employees are number one. Because if I treat my employees as number one, that's going to flow down to my customers. Right. So I love that. Now, Karla, back to you. I'm gonna. What would you mention? You mentioned customer outcomes. What would change if you managed your distributed team based purely on customer outcomes rather than activity metrics?
It will drive them to understand what success means in their role, instead of just how I'm going to create a punitive mindset. Instead, I will say, this is what success means for you. This is how your activities tie into the impact with customers. Whether it is renewals, we want to check how many customer success qualified leads you bring. We want to see your impact for your accounts on NPS or CSAT scores. Those are metrics worth absolutely constantly looking at, because you can do it at the individual contributor level. You can see their impact there. But for that, first I have to make sure that they understand how their impact flows into it. What is a customer success qualified lead? What counts as it and what does not? What is just like, hey, I overheard them say something that doesn't tie into anything. If I'm going to create a bonus, then I have to make sure that I can track it. And I cannot track it if it's just, hey, this is how I'm going to monitor you, or this is how I'm going to measure you. But I don't tell you how that will evolve. So it's very important for me always to look at, am I conveying the expectation, and can I measure that result?
Yeah, and things like CSAT and NPS and renewals and expansions are all trailing indicators. If we don't get people doing the right things the right way in the right time up front, then we're never going to have an impact. It's always going to be a story. The story's already been written at that point. So I love that you're connecting back to, here's why we do things the way we do things.
Yeah. In fact, it also changes the conversation with the team. If we go with the outcome, right? Instead of asking like, did you do a task? Did you do an activity? Rather ask the right question, like, what moved the customers forward this week? So which feels more meaningful and motivating.
Yeah, there. I like you put the motivating piece in there as well. People in these roles, don't you find, Chelsea, that people in customer success roles, or customer experience in general, are motivated around, that empathy, that I'm here, I want to help, right? People naturally in these roles have this desire to help customers achieve what they're trying to achieve.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I think everybody that's in customer success definitely is people pleasers to an extent, and empathetic to their customers. They want to see people do better. They want to help. They want to be the one to help and see success from these customers. And I think Karla was spot on with, like, it all does tie back to specific metrics. But to Karthik's point, it's understanding, like, what is blocking you? How can I help you help the customer? And getting and understanding where they're at as well, I think, is the most important part of managing a team.
So what do you all, from your perspectives, whether you're, monitoring people or not in your organizations, what or have in the past, what's the real cost from your perspective of our obsession with knowing what everyone's doing instead of trusting experienced professionals to manage their work?
I think the biggest cost is that we're taking away from the real value with the customer and the CSM actually speaking with the customer, because they're more tied up in, did I send that email? Did I make sure I was on for a certain amount of time? Did I send enough emails? Did I set enough calls? And more concerned about that rather than driving value with the customers, which then, of course, goes and translates towards numbers, right? Then the CSAT's going to be higher, the revenue is going to be higher. It all drives that. But if they're more concerned about making sure that they're online and clicking on enough things and sending enough emails or calls, then they're not concerned with the right things. And that's going to affect everything in the long run.
I agree with that. You see a lot of, for example, when you look at when you manage a support desk, and you put as part of their success to be how many tickets do you resolve, they're going to focus on quantity instead of quality. How many of those tickets get closed, but how many get reopened right away because you didn't address the core issue? It's the same thing when you're managing customer success. If I tell you I want to know how many emails you respond to, or how quickly you send surveys, or when we're talking about quality versus quantity, we have to be very careful about, is that really going to create the results that we're expecting. And if the employee is so concerned of that, two things happen. Their morale goes down because now they feel that they're just in an administrative position. And just like Chelsea said, we're people pleasers. These CSMs or CX people want to engage with clients. They want to talk to them. They want to spend time. And there's this feeling that you get, I'm sure Karthik and Chelsea have felt it too, where when you make your customer successful, it's like a huge win. You feel really good about it. You feel like, yes, I did it. But if instead of that, you're just focusing on, did I hit all these checkpoints that my manager is requesting, and I don't even understand why I'm doing it, they will slowly disengage. They won't care and they won't want to contribute to the success of the company, let alone the customers.
Incentives drive behavior.
Yes.
Yeah.
Carrot versus stick.
It was interesting. When we were doing recruiting back in the day, when we were many years ago, I was engaging with a customer of ours, and one of the as I was walking through the job description, this person had, okay, they're expected to do X number of reach outs a day. Mm-hmm. And so I'm looking at this and I'm going, okay, he's quantified the number of touch points they want the person to have in a day. There's nothing else to that. You got to reach out to the customer. You got to reach out to X number of times a day. And so I looked at their background, and this person was formerly an account manager. It was on the sales side. And when you're talking about sales and you are trying to get qualified leads in the door, having this cadence where, hey, we got to hit, X number of prospects a day, because based off of a standard sales pipeline, a certain percentage of them are going to convert to warm leads and blah, blah, blah. That makes sense. Customer success, different beast.
Very different.
Right? Customer's already in the door, right? Customer, it's not about I'm reaching out and touching you, X number of times in a given day, week, month, quarter. It's, are you helping me achieve what I'm trying to achieve? Are you helping me get value out of the solution, right? Every single touch point needs to be something value oriented. Are you getting value from us? Am I giving value to you as part of this conversation?
Yeah. So every activity that every activity that they do should equate to the outcomes, not just touch points. And how many calls you did, how many emails you sent, how many chat you responded. Those are like obsolete. It don't work.
Yeah, I think that there's always going to be asks from CS, right? Like, have so many QBRs a quarter, things like that. But I think that we should think of those more of like guardrails to help support a behavior of speaking with the customer on a regular basis, rather than just like a check the box activity. And that's something that I feel like is forgotten when someone has been micromanaged before, and then they hear that, oh, I need you to have 12 QBRs or whatever the metric might be. It's important to communicate that those are more guardrails to support the behavior in having those conversations.
Yeah, and I think when you think about the sales cycle and then the post-sales cycle, is during the sales cycle, that checklist is basically one outcome expected. Let's close a deal.
Right.
So I always told my team, the sales team goes on dates with the client. We actually marry them. And now we're married. And the only thing that can end this marriage is either they leave us. So we're here for life, right? And managing that is very different, because now you have those checkpoints have to be meaningful. I'm not saying that you buy flowers for your client, but you make sure that they feel valued. And feeling value is the backbone of any relationship. And if the employee is more concerned around the checklist versus valuable driven activities, then the customer feels it.
Have you ever had, and I've had this creep in my career every once in a while, especially when I've had a senior leader that wasn't doing a great job setting appropriate expectations. But have you ever been in a position where you had the fear of not having the visibility into the daily activities that had an influence on your leadership decisions?
Yeah, in fact, in the beginning of this remote work started, even I had that fear, to be frank. Right? So in the beginning, I also built some dashboards and added more frequent check-ins. Just I thought it will be good, but that kind of backfired, right? So if I look back, the real gains come from not from dashboards, right, but from aligning the team around the shared goals and customer outcomes. And that fear was understandable, but the result taught me that trust plus clarity outperforms control every time.
Yeah, I can see that backfiring because people, most people don't like to be, especially people at this, in these roles and at this level, don't like to be micromanaged, right? Once again, hire slow, fire fast. If you got somebody that's not performing and it's just it's clear that that person just doesn't get it or is just freaking lazy, then get rid of them and move on, right?
I think that that moment where you're like, do I have enough visibility as a leader to understand if my team is being successful in how they're driving their accounts? It will happen, I think, at any point in our careers, whether we're admitted or not. At some point, we're like, wait a minute. Especially when you have an account churn, you have to sit back and think, whoa. And so one thing I did was think about, are we measuring success from the point of view of our customers, or are we measuring from our internal point of view? There's always a happy medium. So I separated with the CS ops function. So we focus on understanding what behaviors in the platform were driving a lot of these activities: renewal, churn, the ability to upsell or cross sell. So we started looking at that. So then we could bring it back to the team and say, hey, these are the behaviors that we expect. And the minute that you see this and it goes in the red, which we're going to provide for you, then that's where you trigger this playbook. This is where the playbooks come into place. But I did like to evaluate that every 6 months, because as your customers evolve, economic, whatever is impacting it today, whether it might be tariffs or all these other events that are happening out in the world, it changes the buying behavior or the behaviors of your clients with your products or services. And that assumption you had maybe in 2023 is not going to match what happens in 2025. So every 6 months, I like to sit down with my ops leader and say, let's review what we assume. Is that still success? And if it is not, what do we need to change? And bring the team into your strategy, to your brainstorming the strategy. Bring them in, because when they feel as part of coming up with a solution, they buy into the process that you implement.
I love that. But that actually plays into a bigger question is, there will always be accounts within your portfolio that are those watermelon accounts that seemingly are green on the outside and they're red on the inside. And there's nothing you can do about that because you are not sitting in the boardroom with the stakeholders making decisions. As a matter of fact, you could even have some amazing stakeholders farther down the stakeholder food chain in an organization that is saying everything's great and they get surprised. Yeah. Right. So there was a post, I forget who it was by. There was a post that I commented on by I'm zoning on her name right now, but it was about how they were shocked that an account churned that they were like 95% confident on. And so one of the things that I pointed to was, instead of worrying about the metrics and the health scores and all that stuff, is your team doing everything that they can do to ensure that the customer understands the value that they're getting from you? And have they connected those dots between the value that they're getting and how it plays into some overarching corporate objective? Because if you've done a good job identifying and communicating the value that the customer is getting from what you bring to the table and connecting that to some overarching business objective, it doesn't eliminate you from being cut out of a budget. But if they understand that connection, it sure moves you down the list of the kind of top things to cut, right? Which is what we're constantly jockeying for. And there's always going to be some sort of budgetary, some sort of budgetary analysis going on. So we should be doing everything we can to make ourselves seem like we're indispensable for an organization.
I agree with that. I think that kind of like goes to another layer though, and how important it is to be multi-threaded within the organization.
Yep.
And that's a whole nother conversation, I'm sure. I think you've actually done a session on that before, if I remember correctly. But yeah, that's so important to multi-thread, because just because you have a really good relationship with your admin doesn't mean that the higher ups that are making the decisions see value. So it's very important to have the right people in the room as well.
Yeah, I did a post, I think 2 weeks ago. It was happy doesn't equal healthy, and that's the story, right? Where your CSM is like, oh, the client was so happy, and then they don't renew. But it really is a couple of things. It is a multi-threaded approach. But I always told the team, look at all the stakeholders that you're managing, and we had a quadrant which was influence and power. And so wherever you put them, you knew how to manage them. And why we did that was exactly that. The CSM very seldom will get to talk to the executive sponsor on a regular basis. Sometimes you don't see them until you get to the business review. And at that point, it's too late. And this individual that you're working with is like, oh my God, I love you so much. You are so amazing. You're my friend, my CSM. But at the end of the day, that person might not have influence. They might not even have power, right? They're just there to do the transactional activities, which is great. It helps support the use of your system, but not the renewal. So I think it's very important that as leaders, we look at what type of management is needed. Sometimes you might have very junior CSMs that are not equipped to deal, especially if you have enterprise or strategic accounts with the relationship with the executive stakeholder. Do you need to supplement that? Do you need to tag team between the AE and the CSM? Do you need to step in and be more visible to those accounts? So I think it merits looking at how you have segmented your accounts and whether that whole responsibility should be shouldered by the CSM. If it is and is not performing, then you have the wrong person on the account, and that doesn't mean you have to get rid of them. Yes, fire fast, but it might be a good resource. It might just not be on the right segment. So then you can shuffle things around. But it's important to also evaluate what kind of engagement are we expecting with each of our segments, and do we have the right activities in place to ensure that we have that across all of the stakeholders in an account.
Well, and Chelsea, you mentioned it, Karla, you mentioned it. You know you need to go deeper and wider, right, with your contacts. And to your point, Karla, that if you've got contacts at a lower level in the stakeholder food chain, they may not have influence. One thing I also want people to remember is that influence does not follow title. I have been in plenty of situations where you've had a middle manager or an individual contributor that actually wields tremendous amount of influence.
Yep.
And so you need to be constantly identifying and communicating value in ways that everybody in the stakeholder food chain can relate to, because that person who is, at the end user that's using your solution every day really relishes the fact that they get to leave at the end of the day at a reasonable hour so they can go watch their kid play soccer. That person could have tremendous influence over the key signature authority who is looking for that person who's using it on a daily basis to give them a recommendation on whether they should continue to do business with you or not.
Right. I totally agree with that. I think that comes back to, again, Andrew, what you said at the beginning of the call is enablement, and being able to enable our CSMs to understand how to do that is the most important thing to do.
Yep. We got whole freaking courses dedicated just to that, right? That's like foundation. That's part of our foundations. Here's foundational stuff, right? You need to understand how to manage an account, how to develop a stakeholder matrix, how to identify and communicate value. I mean, these are table stakes. And once again, why it just boggles my mind that you've got companies spending money, hundreds of thousands of dollars on professionals or for customer success automation systems and surveillance software, and they're not enabling their team, right? Yeah. Which can have anywhere from a 3 to 5% impact on your total book of business. So I don't know, whatever. It frustrates me to no end. All right. How about let me see. What kind of questions we got here? Let's see. We got some questions. How about we start taking some questions from the audience? If you all could take I'm going to give you a minute, take a look at that list of questions. If there's anything that you want to jump in on, answer live, to jump in on first. We'll start going through those. And for the audience, you see any questions on that list and you want to see that question answered first, use that up vote button so that we can get the questions that people are really burning to hear answers on answered first. Just give you guys a minute to look through those.
I pick one. So
okay, I see. Yeah. Hey, so while we're doing that and giving people a chance to upvote questions, I got one more question for you. If your top performing customer experience, so success, support, whatever, customer experience professionals could work anywhere, would they choose to work for a leader who monitors their every move or one who trusts their judgment? I know it's a loaded question. But
yeah, of course they would choose trust, right, every single time, because top performance obviously they will value autonomy, purpose, and growth, and they do not need someone watching them constantly every move they take, right? And frankly, if you need surveillance to keep someone performing, then we probably have the wrong pair or the wrong culture.
Or you're doing it wrong, right? What about Karla? Chelsea, I'm assuming it's the same for you?
Yeah, definitely someone that trusts you, because I think of how I would like to be led as well. And so I put myself in the same shoes, and I would rather be trusted than anything else.
I will add one thing to that. It's somebody that trusts their judgment, but has conveyed to them how to measure success in their role. Because many times we say, oh, we trust you, I brought you here, why hire people to tell them what to do? Sure, but have we actually talked to them about how we will measure them being successful? If we haven't, then all that judgment at the end of the process might never lead to growth in their career, because we haven't told them this is what we expect out of it.
I trust you, but I'm not going to tell you what I expect or what my
exactly.
Right? Exactly. No, you need to. 100%. You can manage with trust, but you need to be clear about what that means.
Exactly.
Awesome. All right, let's start answering some of these questions. Our first question comes from Deb. Deb, thanks for joining us. Deb asks, I'm sure you'll eventually get to this, but what are some techniques you recommend to maintain a positive and healthy team culture? Karthik, you wanted to jump in on this one first. What have you got for Deb?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Deb, for asking. So there are many ways that you can do it. Right? One thing is giving that empowerment to each and every individual in your team. Make them talk, right? First thing is that give them an opportunity to let others, the team, know what they've achieved, and talk about the stories, talk about the wins they have done, and any learnings about that they got from the calls that they had, or the discussion they had with the customers. That helps create more positive and healthy team culture. Second thing is that now. It's not always about work. Like how I used to do is that every week I take an hour of time and then create some kind of activities, right? So make them cheering them, instead of just discussing on just the work, talk about or probably play some games and activities quizzes and all that stuff. That will help the team to be more motivated. At the same time, it will also promote healthy team culture.
Love that. Yeah. Hey, celebrate their successes, and let's not always talk about work. Let's get to know each other a little better on a more personal level. Chelsea, Karla, you got anything to add?
I agree.
I agree, man.
Awesome. Um, I also think what's important, Deb, to maintain a positive and healthy team culture is to. It sounds cliche, but when people, I used to tell my team members, don't come to me with just problems, come to me with solutions, right? And I'm not doing that to kind of pass the buck. I'm doing that to basically express to them, hey, if we've got a challenge, I want to hear how you think we should solve it. That might not ultimately be how we're going to end up solving it, but I want people to be involved. I want people to feel like they're part of the solution, right?
Yeah, I had an analogy to that where I used to tell teams, don't call me and tell me that the building is on fire. Tell me what you have done. Have you called 911? Have you gotten people to a safe place? Tell me what you've done, and then I can tell you whether that was the right thing to do or there's something else you need to do. But when you're calling me just to tell me that there's a fire, you're expecting me to get into the whole situation. I'm not even there. So come in and tell me what you've done, and then let's work together to make sure that you have arrived to the right solution.
Yeah. It gets them involved in solving the problem, and also by pushing the team to think about how would we solve these problems, you're actually helping them grow.
Oh, yes.
You're helping them evolve. You're helping them do what they do better.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I said the same once I came into the leadership role, told the same thing. I expect solutions before answers, because what if you do have a better idea than what I have? Like, this is a collaborative space, and it helps you grow, of course.
And Deb, one more thing before we move on. Freaking enable your team. They appreciate that. You're investing in them. You want a good team culture. You want a positive and healthy culture. Make them feel like you're trying to help them. You're trying to make them better. Right? That will always pay off big time. And be part of that enablement. Don't think you can do it. Do it in a vacuum. Awesome. Karthik, can you hit the done button for me? Deb, thank you for the question. And thanks for joining us today. Our next question comes from Karthik, hit that done button there for me.
Yeah.
Next question comes from David. David asks, David asks, I've often heard the mantra, we focus on outcomes and results. However, when someone starts not meeting those results, typically you'll see management then start to backtrack and focus on activity. For example, PIPs, while I think this is valid, is there more of a preferred route to take in lieu of monitoring activities? Chelsea, looks like you wanted to jump in on this.
Yes, I think this is a great question. Thank you, David. And it's very hard not to rely back to focusing on activities, but I think it's important to create a communicative environment so that you understand what is stopping or blocking or the CSMs or the individual you're speaking to on being able to have the results that you're expecting. But it's also important to help them understand that these activities are helping to promote the behaviors and get the results that we want. So just making sure that they understand why these results are impacted by the behaviors or activities that are not being done is the most important thing. So keeping the conversation lines open, and helping them understand why the activities are being tracked, and that those relay then back to the behaviors and activities.
And this goes back to what Karla, you said from the get-go, right? I've got to explain what our expectations are, and why these activities play a role in helping our customer achieve what they're trying to achieve and ultimately reflect positively on the business.
Yeah. And what if you do get to a PIP, which I'm sure a lot of us have had to do that at least once in our career, for me, a PIP has two outcomes. Either the employee is demoralized and leaves, or is a reason for you to exit the employee. I mean, very seldom an employee come out of a PIP and be successful in the role. It's a bad technique to improve performance. So it should be used when you are really at no other point of working with the employee. At that point, for me, is better to part ways and put them through that whole process, because you have to work through it too. And like I said, very seldom does it work. Instead, for me, is looking at having that conversation the first time that the behavior is not met. Like, hey, here, what's going on? I like to understand, because sometimes there might be something else happening. It could have been a great performer and something personal happened. But if it's already been a discussion, then at that point you're going to have to probably go through progressive discipline if it doesn't improve. But before you get there, I will definitely have the conversation. Was something not understood? Do they need more training? Was the process unclear? Maybe it's not matching how the account is behaving, or maybe there's complexities that you don't know. So before we jump to disciplinary action, I always like to understand what is not clicking. Why is this not working?
Right. I agree with that.
Yeah, that was one of the first questions that I would ask when one of my middle managers would come to me and say, "Hey, I think we need to put this person on a PIP." I'd say, "So how do we get to this point?" I would approach it not in an accusatory way, but I would look to them and say, "What did you do or not do as their manager?" Right. So back to my original contention: Are we putting people in management roles? And we talked a little bit about this on Monday in our prep call, which Chelsea, you weren't there for, but we were talking about how are we pushing people into management roles because it's part of career progression and they really shouldn't be in a management role, right? I have worked over my career with some great sales executives, account executives that, their only next step in their career was to get into sales management. And they were amazing sales executives and they sucked as sales managers.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a great individual contributor does not equal a great manager.
Right.
They're different skills. And, I started my career at Four Seasons Hotels, and they had a program called Becoming a Manager. When you were ready for management, they will put you through that. And I thought that was a great investment from the company in ensuring that you had the understanding, because there's so many things that you have to do that are not fun, like disciplining employees or, coaching sessions. And if you're not equipped to do that, then you're just given power and say, now you're the manager. You might have been great at what you were doing, but now you don't get to do it. Now you're stuck just doing stuff that has nothing to do with what made you enjoy your role. So one thing I invite people to do, and I do some mentorship right now with Latinas in Tech, for example, and when I talk to people that I'm giving mentoring to, I always tell them, why do you think you have to be a manager? And if the only reason they want to be a manager is because they feel that that's the next step in their career, then let's talk about what actually it entails. Does that sound like fun? Is that something that you think you will pursue? No, I really like to do X. Well, you can be also an individual contributor that continues growing into your career. It's up to your manager to develop that career ladder for you, so you don't lose a high performer because you're pushing them into management.
There's so few organizations that actually have formal management training, right? It's very, very few. It's organizations like the one you were in, Karla, and huge company, IBM, Deloitte, some of these just enormous organizations will have a management training program. It's why we developed our own management essentials program, so people could understand, hey, if I'm going to get into management, here's the stuff that you're going to need to deal with. Here are the basics, right? And I was always more interested in developing individual contributor career paths for my teams than management career paths for my teams, because if they're really good at being an IC, let them be an IC.
I agree.
Awesome. David, thank you for the question. Our next question comes from Michael. Michael, thanks for joining us. Michael asks, if CSMs have a lot of accounts per CSM, what is the best way to measure customer outreach and activity or productivity, especially when leadership is focused on quantitative measures versus qualitative measures? Karthik, looks like you want to jump in on this one first, but that definitely is a problem when you're focused just on quantitative versus qualitative.
Yeah, exactly. So there are a couple of ways that we can do it. Thank you for this question. So just look at number of percentage of accounts that are touched monthly, calls, emails, QBRs, in a more meaningful way. the number of proactive risk or opportunity flags that are logged, then probably what success plans they've created, how much they've updated, and most importantly, time to first value, how many appoints they've achieved. So this actually help keep measurement of objective, activity focused, and tied to leading indicators, even in a high volume model.
Karla, Chelsea, anything to add?
Well, I think the question is tricky just from the perspective of is this what type of accounts are we talking about? If they are your SMBs, the smaller accounts where the touch points can be digital, then I will recommend them potentially implementing digital success programs where you can do this at scale. If, on the other hand, the book of business is large, but it does warrant that the CSM is more in touch with them, you have to look at what is specifically defining success for that segment. If it's more of mid-market or enterprise accounts, what are the behaviors that you're expecting that are driven, but that could be also automated. Now, automated doesn't mean that now the CSM doesn't take part in that, because you can automate a lot of these data pooling or looking at metrics. You can put in Tableau. You can do so many things. But does that CSM understand how to read those metrics? And more importantly, what to do if it's usage or adoption is going down? Do they understand what they need to do? Because once it gets to yellow, that's a problem, but that's still an opportunity to act. If they don't know and you're expecting at scale, you're leaving them to solve one by one on their own, trying to figure out how to do it. So I think it's two things: looking at what is the behavior of that segment that they're managing, even if it's across segments, and how to automate some of these ingestion points so they can then leverage the data and show up prepared to their meeting touch points with the customer, to their business reviews, and work internally to drive solutions for them.
So that's great points. Michael said SMB, commercial/SMB. But yes, I think I agree with you. There is, you want to explain to your CSM who's taking what I like to refer to as reactive proactivity, right? I'm going to react based off of something that goes out of whack, but you got to give them a playbook. When this happens, make sure you do it X, Y, and Z. Hey, I'm just calling up to see how things are going, right? Or hey, I'm noticing a drop in usage of the functionality that I know gets a lot of value. Is there a problem?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think a lot of these, Andrew points out, to better serving activities from managers than just tracking clicks, developing those playbooks.
Yes, 100%.
Completely agree with that.
Okay. Awesome. Michael, thanks for the question. Karthik, if you could hit the done button for me.
Yep.
All right. Our next question comes from Carrie. Carrie asks, how do you change habits and workflows without tracking their activity related to the desired change?
I mean, you still have to track to an extent. Sorry, I jumped on it because I didn't see it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah.
And you still have to track, but I think we're talking about two different things. Are you tracking the employee in non-value added activities, clicking, being on Teams or whatnot? Or are we tracking the outcomes that we expect from each of those activities? And I think in this scenario where you say, how do you change those habits and workflows without tracking their activity? I will start by figuring out what is it that you're tracking right now and what has been the impact. Because tracking for the purpose of tracking is not going to give you anything. But I always like to translate what I'm doing into a result. If I'm going to implement a CSAT program, what am I going to do with those results? And then how does that translate into a strategy to improve? If I'm just tracking, but then I do nothing with it, that data is worthless and might as well stop using the team on that, because that's just wasted labor.
This reminds me of my days in analytics when I'll never forget a meeting. I went into so I was working for Business Objects, and we got acquired by SAP at some point, but definitely one of the big dogs in analytics. And I walk into a meeting of a bunch of senior executives of a very large financial services firm, And we were really getting into executive dashboards, and I was leading the charge across the entire company about executive dashboards and having them be meaningful and, impactful. And so they showed me their design for this executive dashboard. They were quite proud of it, and they threw it up on the overhead. This is back when we still had overhead projectors in the conference room, so I'm really dating myself. But they throw it up on the on the screen, and I go up to them and I look and I start pointing at metrics, and I go, okay, so what happens when this metric turns red? And what happens when this falls below this? Who are you going to pick up the phone and call? And when they had no answer for me, I put a big X through it. And so they had this beautiful executive dashboard, and I had X's through like 3/4 of the metrics, because it's like, this data is useless if you're not show me something that I can actually take some action against. Otherwise, what's the point? So love that. Awesome. Thanks, Carrie, for the question. Our next question comes from, and just a reminder, it's 2 minutes at the top of the hour. We will keep going until 1:15. So if you can stick around, we're going to continue answering as many of these questions as we can. Ed asks, someone mentioned leading versus trailing indicators. That probably was me, because I love waxing poetic about that. What are some leading indicator activities to track while managing remote CSMs? Okay, Karthik, You want to jump in on this one first?
Sure. Yeah, it's the time to value, it's time to first value, then any risk flag before they escalate, and things like, if the CSM is able to identify the risk even before the customer can escalate. And then product training sessions that are delivered, number of accounts with the updated success plans, and number of proactive customer check-ins and ETRs. So these are the leading indicators I would say. It's all outcome based, not the activity based.
So I would add to that feature adoption rate, right? Because that's indicative of whether or not my customer success team is, whether it's a customer success manager or enablement team, are they highlighting the features that are, and specifically the features that are of highest value, like you said, time to first value, user seat utilization versus how many licenses they've purchased. Maybe if you're dealing with integrations, how complete is the integration? I would also look at support ticket volume, sentiment trends. Those are all leading indicators that are going to basically tell you, okay, how healthy is my account, and are my team members doing the things that need to be done in order to help ensure the customer's getting value?
Yeah, all these go in Apple's core, to be short.
Response times, CSM outreach, how much customers are participating in trainings, webinars. Those are all indicative to me of whether or not my team members are positioning everything from features to training in the right way with our customers.
Customer engagement, time to value. Yeah.
Customer engagement, time to value. Chelsea, anything else?
No, you guys hit all the same ones that I would say.
Okay. Awesome. Ed, thanks. Karthik, hit done. There you go. Awesome. Let me refresh this. Okay. Sean asks, this may be a bit of a tangent. How do you drive team cohesion in a remote environment when each team member is siloed by their own book of business? Karla, you want to jump in on this?
I'll take that one. The most challenging thing is for team members to feel like they're part of a team. They feel themselves on their own. They might have their one-on-ones with you. You might have a meeting or a stand-up where you talk to all of them, but they still, at that point, you're talking to them and you're not fostering that they talk amongst each other. So a few things you can do is, when you have your touch points, if you have activities where you allow them to brainstorm and separate them into rooms, Zoom allows you to do that, Teams allows you to do that, Google Meet lets you do that. So then they start learning how to think or how to work with each other, how to brainstorm. So I used to throw a case study, and then I would say, go and think through it. And then I will separate them into rooms. And usually the people that don't work together, So I will foster that. Another thing is before somebody will ask me a question, I said, have you asked the others? So I will enable the team to go and work as a team on solutions because somebody had already learned through that, share it with others. And if it was a recurrent problem, then I will say, you know what, I think we need to document it. So on our next session, let's work through it as a team. And again, enable that call, work with each other. You are part of a team. In the chat, you can ask each other questions because I wanted them to learn by the experience of working together versus just me being the sole source of knowledge. It's a heavy load to carry if you are the one that is the gatekeeper of all knowledge and all processes. And when you have an entire team that can work together. And another part of that is what is happening at the enterprise level or at the large account level can help a lot your SMBs or your smaller accounts because the problems are bigger, but the solutions might be similar in terms of how they handle the problem. And more so if it's a product challenge, they might have gone through it. So sometimes they will come together with an idea that will propose to product. Sometimes it was a common problem, and then they will all bring it to my attention and say, this is happening to all of our accounts. So that was aggregated feedback that I could take also with product as their leader and have the supporting documentation. So it's all really about enabling them to work together.
Yeah, I love that. The cross-account collaboration is key. I would take that a step further. I would pair CSMs up on complex renewals or expansion opportunities, right? And I like what you said. You got to mix it up. So maybe what you do it on a quarterly basis, you kind of mix things up a little bit and get people, force people to work together. I like this notion of manufacturing water cooler moments. So, weekly case study lightning rounds or customer story exchanges or competitive intel sessions. Something that we always used to do when we would meet even in person. I would have every month I would have a team lunch and learn. Or I'd buy lunch for the team. We'd all go into the boardroom and somebody would present something. Maybe it was a new feature we were going to release, and their responsibility was learning about the new feature, creating a presentation, and presenting it to everybody. And that's something you definitely can do in a virtual environment. And then I love that the 100% on the team-based problem solving. That's huge.
Yeah. I totally agree with all of that. I think it's so important to encourage individuals to go to other people within the organization rather than, like Karla said, having to have all of the knowledge go through me. So anytime I have somebody that's asked me something and I know it's from like our implementation team, I encourage my CSMs to go to them directly to get the answers, collaborate with them. Another thing that our CSM team in North America does, I think in each of our regions, but what they do is they meet, I think every week or every other week, they meet as a collective without management so that they can talk amongst themselves, get to know each other. They can go through problem solving. They can talk about things without the pressure of having any leadership on the team. I think that kind of takes place of like the water cooler moments. And then just like Andrew said, we connect our CSMs across different regions as well. So if you work in a global organization, I think it's really important to reach across to another region to understand what they're doing as well, and have mentors or just buddy groups is just so important.
Awesome. Okay. Next question comes from test user. I suspect that is not that person's real name. Any tips in managing up? We have a brand new CS team, more in the incubator stage, but having pushback and misunderstanding from upper management that view the role as more an account manager level role than CS. It's a daily struggle to try to illustrate the value of what's trying to be built. And Karla, you wanted to jump in on this one first.
Yeah, and I just so test user takes solace on this. It doesn't happen just when you are at that incubator stage. It happens a lot of times when leaders go and take a new team, and your executive team does not really agree on what is customer success. It's because everybody has a flavor of it. Some people think it's account management, where it's more like commercial oriented. Other people say it's more support to solve tickets. Others say it's more implementations. So what I would suggest here is to get alignment from the top, because it's impossible as a leader to build a team that is going to be successful when that does not equal the version of success from the top. So you're going to be measuring things that in their eyes, that's just not going to resonate. If you are building a team that is going to be more outcome focused, they just look about retention, for example, and they're thinking more about growth, you are not at the same level. So you have to have agreement from the top on what is this team, what is the target for this team. And it's also very valid to come and say, you know what, we're at the early stages. So if your biggest problem right now is churn or retention, then retention should be the team that you're building. And that's how you propose it to them. You go and say, we're going to focus on retention. So our team is not going to be right now working on growth. It's not going to be working on upsell or cross-sell. It's not going to be commercially driven. If your team is, right now what you're trying to do is help sales, not only keep the accounts, but also grow them, that's a different skill set that you have to build. And at some point in my career, I had a team that was built for retention, and then they came back and say, now they have to work and do the renewals from a commercial standpoint. I said, I didn't hire for that skill, because you are looking for somebody that knows how to do negotiation contracts, right? So I will say you have to be very, very aligned from the top on what is it expected out of this function. If you don't get that buy-in from the top, it's going to be a never-ending struggle. And the next thing you know, they're going to rebrand that team from being customer success to something else. And that is going to demoralize your team members and also impact the accounts that have already been served by these individuals.
I think it's important to maybe understand what they think success looks like for this team and then try to collaborate on that. So then you have an understanding of where they're at and you combine your understanding of where you're at and let them know that. I think that a lot of times people are afraid to ask the questions and just assume that they already know what it actually looks like for your CS team. So ask them what the expectations are, what success looks like in their mind for a CS team, because that could look very different than what your expectations are. And you need to be aligned on that. So very much to Karla's point, but just remembering to ask those harder questions, just like when CSMs don't ask, like, if you were to renew tomorrow, would it be a yes or a no? It seems like a harder question to ask, but you won't know until you do.
Yeah, I would also add like whatever you would want to do or like ask the management, go with the data. So you need a strong data to back you up. And so like Karla mentioned, it could be anything. If churn is high, then probably you need to build a team around churn. But for that, you need to prove that like the churn is very high, and then like you need customer success managers to act on the churn, not on just like retaining the customers, not on expansion. So you need a strong data to back that up.
All right, I've been writing down a few notes here. So, this is a common challenge, especially in with newer CS teams. So I don't want you to feel like you're sitting on an island, right? You're essentially fighting two battles: proving CS value and educating leadership on what CS actually is. So, one, speak their language, right? It's all about revenue impact. So start with numbers that they care about. Map current customer churn to lost revenue dollars and be specific. Say things like, we lost 47,000 in MRR last quarter from preventable churn. Calculate expansion opportunity that's being missed. Our best customers could grow 40%, but we're not capturing it. Show competitive displacement risk, right? These customers mention evaluating competitors and support tickets. Use quick win metrics that we've already mentioned: time to first value for new customers, support ticket reduction per account, reference or case study, upsell conversations. Then you want to reframe the conversation. You want to position CS as a revenue protection and growth organization, right? And you could use account manager language that they understand, right? Call it proactive account management initially, and frame health scores as account risk assessments, right? Present customer success plans as growth strategies, right? We're trying to, it's not like you don't want to rip the Band-Aid off. You want to take it off slowly, right? And then potentially prove value through pilot programs, right? Pick 10 to 15 strategic accounts and document their current state and their usage, their health, their satisfaction, and then apply CS methodologies for 90 days or 120 days and see where they're at, right? Show the before after metrics. It's hard to argue with data, although there's some out there today that seem to be able to argue with it anyways. Address the just account management perception, right? So account management is all about how we can sell more. Customer success is how can we make them more successful, which leads to selling more, right? It's the same end goal. It's just a different path. And then demonstrate some of the unique customer success activities, optimizing onboarding, usage analysis, success milestone mapping that drives retention, cross-functional collaboration. These are all things that traditional account managers don't do. So just a few things off the top of my head that I think are that are important. But at the end of the day, it's going to take a gradual evolution, right? Start with the hybrid account manager customer success approach if you need to, and then gradually shift focus from selling to success. And there's plenty of information available about how impactful this approach is. One last question from one of our regular participants, Ola. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us again. Ola asks, how do you balance the need for alignment through meetings in remote CS teams with avoiding overload? And how do well-being and motivation factor into that balance? Anybody have a perspective on this for Ola?
I think this is something that everyone struggles with. And I think this kind of comes back to what we talked about at the beginning of the call of having meetings that are meant for meetings and not having those that could be an email or a Slack or a Teams message. Something else that I actually found very useful is audio messages. So sometimes, especially with like my leadership, if there's something that I need to talk to her about, but I know she's in and out of meetings as well as I am, I just send an audio message and we communicate that way. So just finding other ways to communicate outside of Zoom or Teams or some kind of video chat, because there is the Zoom fatigue, right? So, and then of course, making sure that meetings are valuable, just like we expect our CSMs to provide value with our customers, we should be providing value in meetings as well. Not just having a meeting just to have a meeting. And then factoring in well-being and motivation. So something that, especially with leading a global or a region-based, I'm in North America, and my CSMs are across all of the different time zones that we have here. And so just being mindful that my 4 p.m. on Mountain Time is going to be 6 p.m. on Eastern. And so making sure that like I know that he's having dinner at 6 p.m. with his family. I'm not going to schedule a call then. And I'm taking into consideration their well-being and being mindful of that.
So I just had this conversation with a advisory consultant of mine, or a consulting advisory customer of mine, just last week. And so a couple things that I talked to or I advised this leader on. First was a meeting audit and restructuring. So there is this, I suggested he apply the 50-25-15 rule. 50% reduction in standing meetings, 25% of remaining time converted to async communication, and 15% reserved for true collaboration. And then what we did is came up with a meeting hierarchy. So daily meetings are only if managing crises or onboarding new team members, weekly team sync of 30 minutes max, talk about wins, blockers, knowledge sharing, bi-weekly customer portfolio reviews, strategic discussions, monthly team building training, deeper strategic planning, quarterly comprehensive planning and relationship building, take a async first alignment. So replace meetings with documentation, things like Slack, right? Smart information sharing, the need to know now versus nice to know later distinction, maybe weekly digest emails, and then focusing on meeting quality over quantity, right? every meeting needs to have a clear agenda. They need to be sent 24 hours prior. If you're expecting people to present to the meeting, clearly articulating that, helping people understand why the meeting's in place, time boxing discussions, optional attendance for FYI items. You can you can actually listen to the recording after the fact. And then there's a lot of companies these days that are integrating well-being into their operations. So they have meeting-free zones like Focus Fridays, or those non-meeting Wednesdays, right? Or daily 2-hour blocks that are for deep customer work. Time boxing is a great approach. So, all right.
Can I just add one last thing?
Yes.
I used to ask my team at a different company at the end of the meeting, was this meeting helpful, or did I learn something today? And it's a poll that you can use in any tool. And they will give me thumbs down or not, because I wanted to make sure that I use their time with purpose.
Yeah.
So if it didn't resonate with them, it was fine. It was not necessarily a critique. I just wanted to know if they felt that I added value.
Yeah, love that. Yes, Deb, I'll post something on LinkedIn about the meeting audit and the restructure, as well as the cadence after the call. All right, we've reached the end of today's session. I want to thank our guests for sharing their valuable insights and experiences. Your contributions make these discussions truly meaningful for our community. To our audience, thank you for your active participation. Share your thoughts about today's session on LinkedIn by tagging me, our guest, Success Hacker, or Success Coaching. We love hearing your takeaways from these events. Mark your calendars for our next CS Leadership Roundtable on August 13th, when we'll discuss driving expansion and revenue growth, something that is top of mind for every CS team these days. Finally, let me leave you with this. Great CS leaders know they don't have all the answers, but they know where to find them, and that's why we created this series. Have a great rest of your day and month, and we'll see you next month.